So hello and welcome to the second part or actual second part of our RUSEFI tuning guide. Today we are going to look at our base engine configuration, or rather what we need to set up before we want to do our first start, and basically all of the settings. If you want to support us, you can become a channel member and help with our efforts of bringing tuning to the masses. To those who already do, I thank you a lot and appreciate what you do. We are going to start with the base engine and base engine settings. Some of these things here aren't really necessary for the tune itself, but just for identifying the tune, or for, as it says here, RUSEFI online metadata. But the first engine configuration, so number of cylinders, displacement, is needed, and the firing order is also. This should be pretty obvious what to set here. And the fuel strategy also is. So for example, if you want to run a map sensor or map based setup, you will need to select speed density. And if you want to use alpha N, this would be TPS and RPM, or rather TPS and RPM based fuel calculations, plus any other corrections that intake air temperature, coolant temp, etc. are going to give you. MAF is probably going to be used by not really a lot of people, and LUA would be a custom setup, but we're not going to discuss this here because it's not in the scope of this video or this guide. Then we are going to look at our limits. This is pretty important because I think you should set these before you do anything else, because you know what your engine is capable of. So these make sense to set before. Cut off fuel on RPM limit and cut spark. These are defining how the limiter will act. Obviously, if you cut fuel, the limiter will be a little bit softer. You won't have any flames or whatever. But if you cut spark, you will still inject fuel all the time, but only cut spark when you are limiting the RPM. So the total rev limiter might be a little bit more extreme, maybe some flames and stuff. Whatever, you'll have to try about yourself, but the hard cut, especially with a spark cut, might be a little harder on your engine components, so be careful with that. Then we have the capability to use a coolant temp reference. So for example, you can, if your engine is cold, on the right side limit your RPM, or also as a safety, you can, for example, if your engine reaches 110 Celsius, reduce the maximum RPM so that it can cool back down and you don't run the risk of overheating. Then we have the RPM hard cut limiter. This is basically your total or maximum RPM that you are going to reach. And the hysteresis is going to be what the RPM drops back down to, depending on how this is set up or how high this is. So this will influence on how the limiter will sound. Here we also have the boost cut. So 300 kPa would be 2 bar, or 2 bar in total. So 200 kPa boost, because obviously the 100 kPa is atmospheric. So you'll add whatever is your boost threshold or your boost cut on top of that. And then we have the hysteresis thing, where when it goes under 280, you have boost again, or it will stop cutting basically. Then we have the injector duty cycle limits. This is important because you don't want to run your injectors at 100%. It's pretty obvious. They can stick open or can get damaged if you do. And you want to limit this to at least 95 instantaneous and 90% sustained. And down here we have the duration of how long the instantaneous limiter is actually active, and then it will go to the sustained limiter. If you are going into the limiter hard, you will obviously have risk of your engine going lean, which you don't want. And the higher your RPM, the higher your duty cycle is going to be, even if your AFR would be the same, or your fuel load, even if your VE table would be the same, because the injectors have less time to inject fuel. Then we have for the soft RPM limiter, the window size would be how much below the hard limiter your soft limiter will act. So 200 RPM, it will basically act or start acting from 7300. The timing retard, how much timing it will retard with the soft limiter. If you want to actually have a soft limiter that will limit RPM, you will have to take away quite a bit of timing, because obviously otherwise it won't, the engine will still go to the hard limiter, or only a little bit slower from the soft limiter zone to the hard limiter. And because if you, for example, are drifting and are hitting limiter quite often, when you are in the soft limiter zone, it is recommended to add some fuel, because retarding timing will cause your EGTs to go up. So getting a lot of, or getting more fuel in is a good thing, or a good measure to cool things down again. And then we have the same thing as a limiter, but it's instead of retarding timing or cutting fuel, it will just close your electronic throttle body if you have one. So you can set this, for example, at 7000 and 7300, then it will start closing the throttle body by 7000 and completely close it by 7300. This would be basically the most comfortable for your engine, as there will be no excess vibrations, no excess detonations, whatever happening inside the engine, and it will just smoothly shut off the airflow to the engine and therefore limit RPM. Going further into trigger, this is where it gets interesting, or rather where you need to set up a lot of stuff, because most cars do have a different or a differentiating trigger setup. Obviously, you are going to have a 4-stroke engine most of the time, so probably most of you. And for the trigger type, there's a lot of trigger types in there from various different models of cars or whatever. If you, for example, have a missing tooth setup, that's also pretty easy to configure, and it's pretty common thing that is on a lot of cars. For example, VW and BMW, for example, often use a 60 teeth wheel with 2 missing. So you would put in the amount of tooth and how many are missing. So in my case, I'm using my 36-2 trigger wheel on my crankshaft. There's also the option to use a trigger wheel on the camshaft and then a second sensor for the cam sync, for example. I'm using it like that on my Toyota, and then you would need to select camshaft right here, because the cam is rotating only once per 2 crank rotations, so that's important to note. And then we have the trigger angle. That's important to set correctly. I will show you in the next video on how to calculate that and how to use your timing light to set the trigger angle correctly, because that's really important that this is correct. Otherwise, your whole timing map isn't going to match and you might risk having detonation or not enough power, or not the full power you could have. And lastly, we have the cam sync. This whole section is basically cam sync. So what input your cam sensor is going to use, I'm using Hall effect sensor 2 because I'm using the second Hall effect sensor, because my first one is going to be from the crank. And then because it is using teeth and not divots or like cuts, I'm using rising. And my cam mode is going to be single tooth, because I only have one tooth on the camshaft, so I don't need anything else. Also, you have a lot of other setups right here. You can also, if you are using only your crank sensor, can set this to inactive, but then you would also have to select wasted spark and paired ignition, because if you want to run both on sequential, you will have to have a cam sensor and cam sync. You can also connect the second one to the exhaust, for example, if you want to, but it's not needed. Same goes for here. This is only the bank selection, so bank 1 intake is where my sensor is located at, and that's where I'm going to put the sensor I have selected down here. And bank 2 intake, I have nothing basically. Then we are gonna go to our injection configuration. We can enable and disable injection, for example, if you want to crank your engine for fuel pressure. So that's a possibility, but obviously we want it on now. And our fuel mode, in this case, we are going to use a crank sensor and a cam sensor, so we can use sequential. If you, for example, are using only a crank sensor with a missing tooth, then you can use batch injection, so paired injection. Simultaneous, for example, is when all injectors fire at the same time. This is common in old EFI cars. For example, the Toyota A86 does this with the first gen 4AGE. And single point injection would be, for example, on a carburetor style injection. So if you have basically one big injector at the throttle body. Then override VE table load axis. Because we have speed density, this is in default would be map, but you can override it here if you want to use a different one, but doesn't really make sense if you've already configured it. We are going to select map. We also could use TPS here, but that doesn't make sense for our case. And phase control is end of injection. That's fine, that's the default. Injector flow, you put in your cc's of the injectors, not your pounds per hour, not whatever else. You can also put in your mass flow, which would be grams per second, but most injectors are spec'd at cc per min. Then you are going to put in your pressure of the fuel rail. Most cars are going to use fixed rail pressure, so your fuel rail is at all times going to be at a fixed pressure because your fuel pressure regulator has a vacuum reference, so it will lower and raise fuel pressure depending on the pressure in the intake manifold, and therefore your actual fuel pressure will always be at 1 point. So in the case of the MX-5, it's going to be 3 bar, and that is 3 bars actual, so 300 kPa, or if your fuel pressure would be 4 bar, it's 400 kPa, not like with boost, where you would have to add another 100 because of the atmospheric pressure. Stoichiometric ratio is kind of obvious. That's just to put in here for normal fuel. If you are using, for example, flex fuel, you can put in the E100 right here. But as we don't have that active, it's also not active here. Then you have to put in your dead times. Obviously, your dead times you have, in a lot of cases, you have a spec sheet where you can find them. If you don't and they don't match correctly or like 100%, yes, the car will still run. Yes, you can still tune the car, but your VE table will not match exactly what your engine efficiency actually is. It will have the same shape, but it will not have the actual efficiency number. So you will not see if your engine is running really efficient or not. But it's not that huge of a deal breaker. I will also do a video in the future on how to calculate the dead times, but that's just to come and not really something I can do right now because I don't have the equipment. Then we are going to go to injection hardware. This is only where every injector is configured to what output. Basically, on RUSEFI, you can configure it however you want. If you're wiring it yourself, if you're buying a plug-and-play unit, this should be pre-configured. On Speeduino, for example, every injector and every spark output was predefined, so you had to wire them in a specific way, whereas here it doesn't matter, you can wire them however you want. You can also test the injectors right here, which is quite handy. This is per cylinder, so cylinder 1, 2, 3, 4, and yeah, a board test, and that's about it. Same thing goes for bank selection. If you have a V6 or V8, you have to select the correct banks here so that the ECU actually knows that. Well, it isn't really necessary for the calculation because the firing order is predetermined. I think it makes sense to select it nevertheless. The next thing that is relevant to us right now is the ignition settings, because there's also a lot of things that you'll have to worry about, at least in the first parts of setting up the map. We can also disable the the ignition right here, and the mode is the same as with fuel injection or the injection. It just is called differently. We have individual coils. So for example, if you have NGK red tops, so individual coils, then you have individual coils, obviously. Wasted spark, which would be if two coils are firing at the same time. If you don't have a cam sensor, for example, you would use this, or if you would have wired two coils to one output, or if you are just running wasted spark. Then we have a single coil, for example, with a distributor, or two distributors with basically two coils. So that would be, for example, on a lot of V12 cars, because you can't really fit 12 spark plug wires on one single distributor. Also, for wasted spark, if you have wired each coil to one output, and then you want to select individually wired wasted spark right here, so that you actually have every coil wired to one output and selected that. Because if you have a dual firing coil, so for example one coil that fires two cylinders, you obviously only have wired two outputs, and when this is active it will fire two of them at the same time. Then we have the maximum minimum timing advance. While depending on what engine you're going to run, the maximum is probably not going to be more than 45, and the minimum is probably not going to be more than -10, except for if you want to run like a flame tune or a really aggressive pops and bangs tune. Then that might differ somewhat. Then override ignition table, load axis, while the default is map. Again, the same thing as with injection. We can select this here again, not really needed. Timing mode is going to be dynamic most of the time, except for when you're going to set base timing. Then it is set to fixed, and whatever you have as for markings on your timing belt covers or whatever. And then we have the same thing right here again. We have what coil output is to what coil, so that's the same thing as with injection and not really needed anything else. Then we can set the dwell time, which is pretty important because this is basically how long the coil is fed power, or how long the ECU gives the coil the signal to get power, and that's how long the coil is charged. And if that is too long, the coil can overheat and also draw a lot of power, because after a certain time it is saturated, it doesn't need any more or cannot handle anymore. And that's why if you, for example, put NGK red tops or any coil on plugs on a stock ECU, because the dwell time for the stock coils usually is quite a bit higher, they will burn out after some time. They might last for a few years, but the risk is high that they will burn out at some point. And that's why on standalone ECUs you can set the dwell time. And also the dwell correction. If your battery voltage is lower, then it will actually obviously feed in total less current to the coil. So you need to increase how long the coil is being charged. Same goes for if the voltage is higher. Then the other way around is the case. The coil will be needed to charge, or will need less time to charge up. Why is the charge time going higher with RPM? Well, with more RPM, the spark needs more power. So basically, you will probably need to charge your coil for longer to get a little bit of a more powerful spark. While on most engines, peak torque is where the most powerful spark is needed, so at about 3,000 to 4,000 RPM. Depending on your engine setup, this might shift up or down, so you might tweak those around a little bit, but usually, even if you set all these to 2.5, which is like around where the NGK red tops want to sit, should be fine. They just will pull a little bit more power, and the engine will be a little bit more efficient if you scale that down. That's about it for this video. If you have any questions, let me know down in the comments below. As I said, next video we're going to worry about how to set the base timing, because a lot of people have trouble with that, and it's quite a process if you aren't using a timing light from the start and you want to calculate your base timing or your trigger angle before you start your engine, so that you can actually get it running, and yeah, so that it actually runs, and yeah, then you can correct your base timing while the engine is running, which is a lot easier if you're, for example, doing this alone. Other than that, as I said, have a nice day and goodbye.